Pat Garrett was made Lincoln County Sheriff to eliminate Billy the Kid, having captured Billy with Secret Service aid on December 22, 1880, after shooting dead two of Billy's companions while trying to kill him. Garrett finally anticipated success when 21-year-old Henry McCarty, self-named Billy Bonney, arrived in Lincoln to his custody on April 21, 1881, having been sentenced in his Messiah murder trials to hang on May 13, 1881. Only gallows building remained. Pat Garrett didn't factor in the Lincolnites. He should have, because 1 week later, on April 28, 1881, Billy broke jail, while no Lincolnite raised a finger to stop him. What did the Lincolnites know, and what had they done? Their secrets have never been revealed, but one can guess by looking at Lincoln's history through their eyes. Their 1 mile long, one-street town had been in the epicenter of years-long Santa Fe Ring atrocities. The Ring controlled the territorial government, courts, and lawmen. As their reminder, in their town lay Ring victims, possibly unmarked, because the local Ring sub-boss and merchant, James Dolan, involved in all the murders and never prosecuted, controlled the town. The dead were British merchant rancher and Ring competitor John Tunstall, Lincoln County War Battle freedom fighters Alexander McSween, Harvey Morris, and possibly Francisco Zamora and Vicente Romero, and finally attorney Houston Chapman, who'd come to prosecute Ringite Lincoln County War Commander N.A.M. Dudley. In the 1850s, that Hispanic town was called La Placita del Rio Bonito. It became a Santa Fe Ring obsession. The Ring was started in 1866 by Missouri attorneys Thomas Benton Catron and Stephen Benton Elkins to cheat Mexican grant owners out of their land. But Catron's first exploitations were mercantile, money lending, and selling rustled beef to forts. Elkins departed to Washington, D.C. politics to ensure federal protection. Catron stayed as territorial boss. Ring malignancy metastasized early. Catron allied with Fort Stanton's sutler store merchants, Emil Fritz and Lawrence Murphy, only 9 miles from La Placita del Rio Bonito. The stores supplied Fort Stanton with bad hay from La Placita del Rio Bonito's Saturnina Baca, an army captain who'd served in Fort Stanton and befriended Fritz and Murphy. Unlike anti-Ring Hispanics harboring grievances, opportunistic Baca joined the Ring. In 1869, Baca gave Catron what he wanted. He introduced a territorial legislature bill to create Lincoln County, with La Placita as county seat, but renamed Lincoln. Unlike anti-slavery actual Abraham Lincoln, Catron intended to enslave that county with his mercantile and ranching monopolies. Baca also backed Ringite Fort Stanton Major William Brady for Lincoln County's first sheriff. In 1873, the sutler store's violent clerk, James Dolan, tried to kill a Fort Stanton soldier for reporting the bad hay and got them evicted. Catron backed their constructing a huge 2-story store in Lincoln, nicknamed The House. Its builder was local George Pepin, whose wife's first husband had allegedly been murdered by Dolan, so Pepin could marry her. The house's usurious credit trapped Lincolnites in debt, and Fritz and Murphy added government contracts to the Mescalero Reservation, founded in 1873. With Fritz's death in 1874, Murphy made Dolan his partner, and the Ring's reign of terror began. In 1875, when local rancher Robert Casey beat Murphy in an election, a ring thug murdered him the same day. In 1876, John Riley, Catherine's cattle dealer, in a failed hit, crippled the town's anti-ring Hispanic leader Juan Patron. That year, Murphy and Dolan cheated local Gottfried Gauss out of his profits and inventory from the brewery he'd rented from them. In 1876, an attorney named Alexander McSween settled in Lincoln with his wife Susan. First hired by the house, McSween quit when realizing that they sold stolen beef and mealy flour to the reservation and rustled beef and bad hay to Fort Stanton. But he stayed in Lincoln, whispering anti-ring sentiment. By late 1877, McSween convinced wealthy British entrepreneur John Henry Tunstall to settle in Lincoln, to make his own store and ranches to rival the rings. And McSween built a big residence next to Tunstall's store to house his wife, her sister and lawyer, husband, and their 5 youngsters. Added was a law office with its intern named Harvey Morris. Tunstall's store, just a half-mile from the house, gave fair credit and included a bank whose president was John Chisholm, McSween's client and a cattle king. Soon the house tipped toward bankruptcy, and Tunstall was using the Homestead Act to buy his ranch hands land along local rivers to control miles of grazing to the Pecos River. One lucky employee was a charismatic bicultural teenager named Billy Bonney, who became a local favorite and admired sharpshooter. Another employee was past brewer Gottfried Gauss, now Tunstall's ranch cook. Lincolnites had hope. Then the ring pounced. In late 1877, Catherine entangled McSween and Tunstall in malicious prosecution by lying that McSween embezzled past house proprietor Emil Fritz's life insurance payout, and by lying that Tunstall was McSween's partner, so also responsible for the money. Sheriff Brady was to inventory their property with hope that violent resistance could enable his killing them in self-defense. When they neither fought nor fled, in a terrorist act, Brady used his posse to murder Tunstall on February 18, 1878, lying that Tunstall was herding horses to avoid appraisal. At Tunstall's ranch, traumatized Gottfried Gauss witnessed Brady's arriving posse heading to the murder. The next day, anguished Lincolnites saw Tunstall's mutilated corpse returned by trackers and learned that his horse had been mockingly slain beside him. Billy Bonney then strode into Lincolnites' lore. When Sheriff Brady shielded Tunstall's murderers, 18-year-old Billy gave his eyewitness affidavit on the murder to Justice of the Peace John Squire Wilson, so Wilson could write the arrest warrants himself. To serve them, Wilson deputized Billy and another Tunstall employee, Fred Waite, under Town Constable Atanasio Martinez. So, on February 20th, Brady illegally arrested Billy, Waite, and Martinez, marching them intimidatingly through town and throwing them into the pit jail. Intimidation failed. Tunstall's men organized as the Regulators to get justice. Billy, the youngest, was fondly called Kid. By March 6, 1878, the Regulators captured murder possemen Frank Baker and William Buck Morton, who were killed trying to escape. To paralyze resistance, Ringite Governor Samuel Beach Axtell, after refusing to meet with the Lincolnites' Citizens Committee, issued an illegal proclamation negating Justice of the Peace Wilson's powers and outlawing the Regulators. But Alexander McSween had reported Tunstall's murder to the British ambassador to trigger a federal investigation of the U.S. officials responsible for it. McSween was obviously next on Brady's hit list, So on April 1st, 1878, when McSween returned from hiding to Lincoln for his grand jury embezzlement trial, the Regulators hid in Tunstall's store's corral and ambushed Brady and his deputies. Brady and Deputy George Hindman died. 3 days later, on April 4th, 1878, the Regulators killed murder posseman Andrew Buckshot Roberts, resisting arrest and killing their leader, locally beloved Dick Brewer. McSween was exonerated by the Lincoln grand jury and returned to hiding, but the Regulators, including Billy, were indicted for the Brady, Hindman, and Roberts killings. Then skirmishing escalated, so Governor Axtell removed Sheriff John Copeland, Brady's replacement, appointed by the county commissioners, and illegally made ring-eyed George Pepin sheriff. Brave Lincolnite Isaac Ellis offered his house as a Regulator's stronghold to defend the town. On April 28, 1878, a ring rustler gang murdered new Regulator leader Frank McNabb. On May 4, 1878, federal investigator Frank Warner Angel arrived. Billy risked his life to come to Lincoln to give him his deposition on Tunstall's murder, and Lincolnites, like Squire Wilson and Juan Patrone, would have secretly housed Billy. Sheriff Pepin's assignment was to kill Alexander McSween. Pepin had unsuccessfully stormed his hideout in nearby San Patricio with Fort Stanton troops under new commander N.A.M. Dudley, beholden to boss Catron for defending him for prior court-martials. On July 3, 1878, vengeful Pepin returned to San Patricio with a Messia outlaw gang to massacre residents, infuriating Lincolnites. On July 13, 1878, Billy spoke for the victims in his fierce Regulator manifesto letter to Catron's ranch manager brother-in-law, threatening retaliation. Certain of a coming cataclysm, panicked Lincolnites fled town. On July 14, 1878, McSween led 60 men, Regulators and Mexicans from San Patricio and Picacho, to reclaim Lincoln. Strategically placed in houses, McSween's held the town against Sheriff Pepin's outlaw possemen. Billy was among the protectors in McSween's house, where remained McSween's wife, her sister, and 5 little children. Victory seemed likely. On July 15th, ring-eyed Saturnina Baca acted. Renting his house from McSween, Baca had gotten an eviction notice from McSween for aiding Pepin's men. Writing to Dolan at the house, Baca lied that McSween had threatened his wife and children. This ploy was likely prearranged to circumvent the new Posse Comitatus Act, barring military intervention in civilian matters except to protect women and children. Baca was a traitor to his people. He precipitated Commander Dudley's July 19, 1878 march of troops on Lincoln. Returning Lincolnites would have learned the horrendous events. Arriving with weapons of war, a Gatling machine gun and howitzer cannon, Dudley had threatened McSween with annihilation. He had then marched his troops eastward and pointed his cannon at Jose Montaño's house, causing flight of its McSweens, which precipitated mass retreat of the others, leaving McSween's house besieged. Dudley had threatened to murder Justice of the Peace Wilson if he didn't write false arrest warrants for Billy and McSween. Pepin's men had then set fire to McSween's house around him, his defenders, and the women and children before allowing the latter to leave. By night, the trapped men ran from the burning house into firing posse men. Escaping Billy saw 3 of Dudley's embedded white officers fire a volley at them. Murdered were McSween, Harvey Morris, Francisco Zamora, and Vicente Romero. Lincolnites saw McSween's house in ruins, his corpse in his backyard, with its eyeballs eaten by his starving chickens. Tunstall's store was looted. Lincolnite's hero became Billy Bonney, who couldn't be killed. Most regulators fled the territory. Remaining were Billy, his sidekick Tom O'Falyard, and Charlie Bowdry. Billy planned guerrilla rustling from ringites. By then, Catherine singled out Billy as a future instigator of another Hispanic uprising, and ring-shielding President Rutherford B. Hayes forced investigator Frank Warner Angel to deny Tunstall's murder was by the ring. But Governor Axtell was removed and replaced by Civil War Major General Lew Wallace, who arrived in Santa Fe on October 1st, 1878. Lincolnites rejoiced, thinking Wallace was their savior. In reality, Wallace had no intention of placing himself in the ring's sights. He merely issued an amnesty proclamation for all combatants not indicted, and later allowed even indicted ringites to use it for pardons. Instead, Wallace campaigned against fictional outlaws. Using an outlaw list provided by the ring, featuring regulators, Wallace picked Billy and offered a $1,000 reward for him. Then Wallace's house of cards tumbled. He hadn't anticipated that McSween's brave widow, Susan, would hire a lawyer to prosecute Commander Dudley for murder and arson. Wallace hadn't realized that Billy was so feared by the ring that sub-boss James Dolan had arranged a peace meeting with him. But on February 18, 1879, when their group encountered Susan's one-armed lawyer, Houston Chapman, Dolan, with ring thugs Jesse Evans and Billy Campbell, shot him dead. Then Dolan ignited the corpse. Billy was witness. Lincolnites were again horrified by ring murder and mutilation. But Billy acted. On March 13, 1879, he sent a letter to Governor Wallace offering to exchange his testimony against Chapman's murderers for a pardon for the Regulators' killings of Brady, Hinman, and Roberts. After meeting with Wallace, Billy believed the bargain was made. Billy allowed his sham jailing in his friend Juan Patron's house to await his grand jury testifying. The fancy embossed stationery that Billy used for letters to Wallace showed that his secret backers were San Patricio's Justice of the Peace Gregorio Trujillo and Lincoln's Justice of the Peace Squire Wilson and Juan Patron. Lincolnites, privy to the plan, would have again anticipated justice against the ring. Billy did testify that April. The grand jury indicted Dolan and Campbell for first-degree murder and Evans as accessory, though Campbell and Evans had already escaped. Recognizing Billy's local popularity, ringite Judge Warren Bristol, with ringite District Attorney William Reinerson, changed Billy's own trial venue for his murder indictments from Lincoln County to Doña Ana County's Mesilla, but Wallace issued no pardon. From his house arrest, Billy learned that Susan McSween had replaced Chapman with his office mate, attorney Ira Leonard, and that Dudley's military trial, with Leonard as prosecution co-counsel, would start in Fort Stanton in May. Billy testified against Dudley on May 28th and 29th, 1878, as to witnessing his Posse Comitatus Act violation of 3 of his white officers firing a volley at him and other escaping McSweens, and possibly murdering Harvey Morris. But the court was rigged, so guilty Dudley was cleared. On June 17, 1879, Billy simply left Patron's to await the pardon. But his reputation as Lincolnite's anti-ring zealot was sealed. The Furious Ring even devised his moniker, Billy the Kid, used in Dudley's trial to mean depraved outlawry. By October of 1878, helpless Lincolnites learned that Ringite Judge Warren Bristol had dismissed Dolan's Chapman murder case, claiming no witnesses, and Dolan remained in Lincoln, having ghoulishly taken over Tunstall's store. Billy had relocated to Fort Sumner, where he gambled and saw his secret sweetheart, young Paulita Maxwell, daughter of the town's founder, deceased Lucien Bonaparte Maxwell. But Boss Catron was plotting Billy's death. In September of 1880, likely through Boss Elkins in Washington, D.C., Catron brought in the Secret Service, allegedly to pursue counterfeiters. And for Lincoln County Sheriff, Catron backed a past buffalo hunter named Pat Garrett, who knew Billy and was willing to kill. Garrett won the election with new White Oak settlers, unaware of war issues, believing he stood for law and order, and would pursue outlaw Billy the Kid. White Oak's men then tried to kill Billy themselves. On November 22, 1880, they ambushed Billy at his Coyote Spring campsite. Billy's group escaped to Whiskey Jim Greathouse's ranch, where the posse ambushed again on November 28th and accidentally shot dead their own man, Jim Carlisle, but blamed Billy. On December 12, 1880, Billy wrote to Governor Wallace denying his killing Carlisle. Lincolnites likely learned about Billy's pursuit from a new resident. Billy's 1879 court testimonies had gotten him an ally, attorney Ira Leonard, Susan McSween's anti-ring attorney against Dudley. Dolan had even tried to kill Leonard on April 25, 1879, just 2 months after he'd murdered Houston Chapman. In October of 1880, Leonard met Secret Service operative Azariah Wild, who was in Lincoln under Dolan's control. So Leonard, who tried to get Billy the Wallace pardon, now tried to get one through Wild by offering Billy's testimony against counterfeiters for it. But Dolan told Wild that Billy led the counterfeiters and should be arrested, so Billy backed out. Lincolnites would have soon learned about Pat Garrett's capture of Billy and his companions in Stinking Springs on December 22, 1880. Then they would have heard about Billy's 3-month jailing in Santa Fe, while the ring awaited completion of Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad tracks to Mesilla to prevent partisan rescue. For Billy's Mesilla hanging trials, Lincolnites avoided certain death. None were defense witnesses, but loyal Ira Leonard represented him for the Buckshot Roberts killing and got it quashed by Ringite Judge Warren Bristol on April 6, 1881, because Catron had erroneously filed it as a federal case when it was territorial. But Leonard then quit after a likely ring death threat. Judge Bristol then appointed as Billy's attorney local Albert Jennings Fountain, Catron's friend. Fountain's lackadaisical defense guaranteed Billy's first-degree murder verdict and Bristol's hanging sentence. Angry Ira Leonard likely kept Lincolnites aware of that sinister court. So on April 21, 1881, silent, traumatized, furious, frightened, haunted Lincolnites witnessed their hero Billy Bonney returned to them by wagon, in chains, soon to become another martyr to the ring. And his killer was to be the stranger in their midst, their sheriff for under 4 months, Pat Garrett. Lincolnites knew that Garrett had won the election with the vote of White Oak's Gold Rush newcomers, not them. Garrett beat anti-ring Sheriff George Kimbrell, who'd protected Billy. Lincolnites likely also knew that in his December of 1880 pursuit of Billy, Garrett had murdered past regulators Tom O'Folliard and Charlie Bowdry without legal consequence. But Garrett was unaware of the hostility. He was unaware of Lincoln County war issues or participants. Unaware, he deputized Robert Bob Ollinger as one of Billy's 2 deputy guards. To Lincolnites, Ollinger had been in the Ring's Seven Rivers Rustler gang, which was brought in to assassinate Tunstall, then Regulator head Frank McNabb, then to be in Pepin's posse in the Lincoln County War battle to murder McSween and others. Unaware, Garrett had made James Bell from White Oaks his second deputy. Bell had been on the posse trying to murder Billy, which killed their own Jim Carlisle, then blamed Billy. Bell may have even been the killer. Unaware, Garrett had taken no notice of the courthouse-jail's caretaker. He was Gottfried Gauss, cheated brewer, Tunstall's cook, and Tunstall's murder posse witness, who likely loved Billy as the last survivor of all the good men murdered. Garrett had taken precautions. Lacking jail cells, he designated a big east room on the second floor to hold only Billy. Billy would stay arm and leg shackled and be chained to a floor ring. Ollinger and Bell would keep 24-hour guard and bring Billy's food from the Wortley Hotel. Lulled into complacency, on April 27th, Garrett decided to go to White Oaks to collect taxes. The next day, April 28th, at midday, Bell guarded Billy. Ollinger, at the Wortley with other prisoners, had left behind his Whitney double-barrel shotgun. Billy then asked Bell the crucial question: could he take him to the outhouse? Garrett was unaware that the outhouse was for Lincolnites. Anyone could hide a revolver there. But that wasn't enough. The wrist and ankle cuffs needed a screw key. An accomplice needed access to the building, like Gottfried Gauss. So when Billy exited the outhouse, he was armed. His wrist shackles were likely clasped, but unscrewed. With Bell behind, at the second floor landing, Billy turned, brandishing the revolver, offering to tie Bell. The wrist shackles were off. Panicking, Bell leapt down the stairwell, losing balance and twisting, so Billy's bullet entered his side and exited to splatter the wall. When Bell stumbled to the bottom landing, tellingly, Gauss was there to take him out the back door to die unseen. But did Gauss do more? Bob Ollinger had run back at the sound of the gunshot, but he went to the building's east side. Had Gauss directed him? A clue is that Billy was waiting, perched in the deep ledge of his room's east window with Ollinger's shotgun. When Ollinger was below, Billy blasted him with both barrels, then smashed the weapon and hurled the parts at this hated man's corpse. Then was the moment of truth. There was a life or death problem. The screw key to Billy's leg shackles hadn't been found. He couldn't ride with the chain joining his ankles. He ran out to the second floor balcony, calling to Gauss for a miner's pick. Then came the unbelievable. Struggling with the pick on the second floor, Billy took hours to break the leg chain. Outside, Lincolnites were gathered. Periodically, Billy ran out to the balcony that had no access stairs to address them. Rumored was his shouting, "I'm standing pat against the world." No one interfered. Then things got stranger. With the chain broken, Billy emerged. Gauss had prepared court clerk Billy Burt's pony with a blanket over the saddle, as directed by Billy, to lessen rattling of the chains. But when Billy mounted, the pony bucked anyway, throwing him. Was that the end? Surrounded by Lincolnites, some likely armed, Billy was helplessly on the ground. So what did Lincolnites do? Nothing. Did Billy see Juan Patron, Squire Wilson, Jose Montano, Atanasio Martinez, Isaac Ellis, or Ira Leonard in the silent, motionless crowd? Billy remounted and rode out of town. Lincolnites had finally defeated the Santa Fe Ring in their own way.